Well, welcome to all the viewers and attendees for our action-packed webinar. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Dan King from Energy Now. You can find us on energynow.ca or .com in the United States. I'm the co-founder of Energy Now, and I'm pleased to be here. And Energy Now is very pleased to co-sponsor this event with Rimini Street. Representing Rimini Street is Rene Wells, the VP of Product Strategy. I'd like to let the audience know that we have a very busy webinar today, a full packed house, and we have a special guest, Jeffrey Can, as well as 3 Rimini Street clients, all in the Canadian energy industry. First one is Darren Burdine from Alberta Electric Systems Operator, AESO. Second is Alan Hebel from Alta Gas. And the third speaker is James Taylor from TransAlta. I'd like to encourage all the viewers to participate via the chat board and enter any questions they have, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. Also like to mention that we have a survey running as well during the webinar, and there'll be some more information on the survey and the question. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, and that's Jeffrey Can. I know Jeffrey quite well. He's also a guest speaker and presenter in that with Energy Now. So Jeffrey is an author, educator, podcaster, and speaker to the oil and gas industry. Following an earlier career with Imperial Oil, he became a partner at Deloitte, where he carried out hundreds of projects and assignments in Canada, the US, and around the world. Today, he specializes in digital innovation in the oil and gas industry, teaches a one-day seminar on digital oil and gas, produces a weekly article, podcast on various issues on energy, and has published his first book, which is Bits, Bytes, and Barrels, the digital transformation of oil and gas. So I'd like to welcome Jeffrey to the stage.
Thank you very much, Dan. So the outlines of a future resources industry shaped by the global pandemic are now starting to emerge, but we'll still need to pay for it. And just by way of brief introduction, I like to call myself now a creator of digitally ready talent. And these are the various ways that you can reach me. Probably the fastest way is just type my name into Google, and it should appear ahead of probably various criminal elements that are typically still out there sharing my name. Now, we will look back on 2020 as a pivotal time in the recent history of the planet, likely more so even than 9/11, the Great Financial Crisis, and Arab Spring. And we'll all reflect on our pre-pandemic world, how we used our time and our resources during the outbreak, and how our world was transformed in recovery and beyond. In my case, I used the time to gain 10 pounds, and I learned to cut my own hair, as you can probably tell, very successfully. Now, some of the early adaptations put into place to cope with the pandemic may become entrenched habits. Although personally, I'll be very glad to stop washing my own steering wheel, swabbing my credit cards, and laundering my own money, physically. Now, some features of life that we've been forced to discard may be jettisoned forever, like handshakes and kissing Europeans. But much of what we've already had in place will likely continue to endure. It reminds me of a lesson that I've passed on to others many times over my career. Take a close-up view of things distant and a distant view of things up close. I don't know where this came from. I think it was Sun Tzu. For me, the pandemic reminds me how much of our world that is durable, and it will remain regardless of the course of the outbreak. After the pandemic, for example, there will still be 1.2 billion gasoline cars looking for car accidents on our roads. There will still be 300 million heavy trucks looking for truck stops. There will still be 53,000 merchant and military ships looking for safe harbors. And, of course, dozens of cruise ships still incubating the virus while at anchor off Miami. The jury is out, of course, on the 30,000 aircraft waiting it out in deserts around the world. And there will be plastic, lots and lots of plastic. Some demand for things will be permanently destroyed. That's to be expected. But industry is dependent on all of these existing tools and assets to bring supply chains back to life, to kickstart commerce, and to restore what has fallen away. The world's energy delivery systems have been remarkably resilient throughout the pandemic, which stands in sharp contrast to the fragility of the healthcare system, the collapse of the retail sector, the gutting of the tourism sector, the stalling of the services industry. Asset-centric businesses are built to last, and frankly, during a pandemic, society is most grateful that that is the case. But not so those sectors that are so dependent on labor. They've been increasingly displaced by digital. Now, to put the virus back in its box, society has reluctantly embraced social distancing, which by extension has thrown a number of deeply held commercial and social orthodoxies onto the temporary discard pile. Of course, some of these orthodoxies will snap back into place, but others are looking a lot less tenable. First, office closures have put paid to the orthodoxy that industry professionals must be physically close to get work done. Of course, physical plant workers will still need to be in proximity to the plant, and much of their work requires more than one worker just for safe execution. But the office towers in many cities forced to shut in the pandemic may not reopen, along with downtown parking, inner-city restaurants and services, and, not to mention, municipal tax revenues. Teleworking has been around for a decade or more, but has never really taken off because it required a tipping point. In oil and gas, with its top-down command and control structures, siloed organizations, hardwired with budget systems, it takes but one or two powerful people in the organization to insist that teleworking is unsuitable, and that was that. The orthodoxy has been shown incorrect. Teleworking seems to work just fine when everybody does it. Now, a few very specific industry roles have their own dedicated office facilities, such as oil traders in particular. They've operated out of purpose-built trading floors, not during the pandemic, and yet trade is still being negotiated, financed, and delivered. Some artifacts of the office environment, including the use of paper documents, inter-office mail, signatures with real ink, might linger on, but will become increasingly untenable with this newly decentralized workforce. Another orthodoxy is the imperative of face-to-face collaboration sessions with key suppliers using whiteboards for problem solving. In-person meetings are over, but the general working problems of the industry still go on. New equipment doesn't work properly. Business systems have to adapt to new rules. Ongoing compliance projects need to hit their deadlines. Problems are still being solved. Industry relies on a steady stream of international travel because of distributed assets and their need for ongoing human care. Some, if not all, of that travel is now impossible. Imagine a critical piece of equipment imported from South Korea, installed in a US plant, and in need of urgent attention from a team of senior Korean engineers. If they even set foot in the United States, they're subject to 14 days quarantine. And on return to Korea, they get another 14 days. Industrial sales has always involved lots and lots of in-person meetings, coffee discussions, site visits, practical demos, and collaborations. The sales model is now broken. Industry is quite accustomed to cutting back purchasing activity in response to cyclical changes in commodity prices, but they eventually return to the market. It's not yet clear if sellers will replace their sales models with alternatives to the in-person experience. Creating new ways of working reminds me of a quote from Milton Friedman. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are just lying around. Friedman goes on to say that only in a crisis can the politically impossible become the politically inevitable. Teleworking, teleconferencing on a grand scale were politically impossible in December of 2019 and are now inevitable for any business that aims to keep plugging away during the pandemic and beyond. So here's a few other ideas that are lying around that could get life. Centralized workers in an office can more readily cope with poor quality data. Go visit a colleague and talk it out. Bosses can easily delegate the problem away. But remote workers, at-home bosses, and machine-based business models incur a real heavy price for poor quality data. Productivity suffers. So expect bosses to expect better quality data in their Zoom meetings or their ON24 meetings. many of which will be recorded for prosperity and therefore available to future litigators. Physical distancing and office closures that send people home require that their work tools be portable and anywhere ready. I remember during SARS how important it was to equip all of our consultants with laptops so that they were not stranded without their work tools. Work tools now include data and information. Expect to see workers encouraged to keep their technology with them at all times. Business designs that are dependent on people working in forced close contact are in peril. Workers are going to be justifiably alarmed, if even uninsurable, at the prospect of working conditions dependent on crowded, close, and continued confinement once the full impact of the pandemic is revealed. Industry is stuck with lots of rigid technologies that will remain human-centric for operations and maintenance, but machines that can run those safely, reliably, and impervious to viruses are clearly the future. The rise of the machine-based business model is here. Expect to see a big jump in interest in algorithms, machine learning, artificial intelligence, autonomy, and other technologies that contribute to keeping equipment running longer and harder without human supervision. In 2019, digital was viewed by the resources sector as a future, but not the future. Other possible futures, notably the status quo, still held sway. Once workers and bosses get used to teleworking, both will demand deeper digitalization of the work world. Expect to see more budget being applied to strengthen, expand, and evolve the digital foundations of business. Which, of course, brings me to the pivotal question for this webinar. How are we going to pay for it? Fortunately, the digital adoption that can both lower cost and make ease for faster delivery than traditional industry technologies so that the dollar stretches further. But we still need to find that dollar. That's more of a challenge today because cash flow has fallen with demand. And hence the question, how will we pay for it? I'll turn it now over to Rene.
Well, actually, thank you very much, Jeffrey. Much appreciated. I'd like to welcome Rene Wells onto the stage. But I do have a question for you, Rene. Jeffrey mentioned how important it is to enable digital transformation within energy industries. But the multi-million-dollar boardroom question that executives are often left to answer is, how are we going to pay for all this? Rene, can you help us with some insights on how to answer this question?
All right, Dan, thank you. Thank you for having me today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share our perspectives on the ways to transform your IT spend away from costly ongoing operations to opportunities that really drive high-impact business outcomes. Before I do so, I need to flash our legal disclaimer. That's good enough for me. All right. So during Jeffrey's presentation, he gave us an amazing background of industry disruptions that have occurred in the past and those that are actually occurring today. He's also provided us some insights into what needs to happen to make sure that organizations in the resource sector first survive and then thrive in the future. He mentioned digital adoption at the top of the list. However, on the flip side, there's a problem. And there's actually, it's a big problem. We have some data from some Gartner surveys today. The first is actually 317 CFOs and financial leaders, where 62% of the respondents have stated that they're planning to cut cost of organizational budgets this year. It's not surprising. Most organizations across the globe are pressured to find significant cost savings. And IT budgets, unfortunately, have an IT background. So those IT budgets are at the top of the list to find those cost reductions. Fact is, CIOs and their teams are typically the ones that help identify, support, and even maintain these technologies that Jeffrey highlighted in his presentation towards the end of that presentation. And in many cases, CIOs and their teams are the ones that are leading these digital transformation projects. As leaders in your organization, you know that maintaining the status quo is simply not an option. and most of you know exactly what you need to do. You know the technologies that could impact your business the most. But the challenge, the budget. Most of you are being asked to cut costs. You are trying to save jobs. You're trying to preserve cash, but somehow you have to reprioritize and pull forward the projects that enable endless opportunities and can transform your business. If you look at the slide that I'm showing here, maintenance costs can stifle productivity and innovation. And this number keeps going up. In 2015, it was 87%. In 2016, it was 89%. And in 2017, it moved to 90%, and it's hung out there for a little while. According to Gartner, CIOs are typically spending as much as 90% of their IT budgets on ongoing operations and enhancements. That's just leaving 10% to business transformation that can support competitive advantage and growth. We also know that in recession years, cost efficiency is as equally important as growth. We also know that the majority of CEOs see technology as an enabler to growth. This budget model that you see on this slide is no longer sustainable. Something needs to change. So now that we know what the problem is, the next question is, what specific steps can an organization take to alleviate this budget challenge? So first and foremost, evaluate third-party support, especially for Oracle and SAP ERP applications, as well as database. Even according to Gartner in their Predicts 2020 report, there are several areas of opportunity for organizations in the resource sector to help reduce cost. Gartner calls out third-party support, like the one offered by Rimini Street, as one of those safe havens and opportunities while evaluating your future. Gartner has predicted almost a 200% increase in third-party support market. And if you look at the data we have here on this slide, Rimini Street represents 86% of that third-party market. By the way, each and every one of you on this call will get access to this Gartner report. So I'd like everyone to take a look at what we at Rimini Street like to call our iceberg. This is a total maintenance savings model that's been validated by Nucleus Research, and it's based over 70 detailed Rimini Street client ROI studies. Our price is simple. It's 50% off of your vendor annual maintenance support fee, but that's just the tip of the iceberg in total cost savings. When you add up all of these savings categories that you see on the slide, an organization spending $1 million in annual support fees would actually save $1.5 million per year. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper on each layer of the savings in the iceberg. First, the top layer, immediate reduction, 50% off your current vendor annual maintenance support fee. So if you're paying $1 million today for Oracle or SAP support, your cost with Rimini Street is half of that. Below the waterline, forced upgrades and updates. The rule of thumb is one major ERP upgrade happens every 5 years. And that cost for that upgrade is double your annual maintenance fee. So in this example, if your maintenance fee is $1 million per year, your upgrade cost would be $2 million. If you divide $2 million by 5 years, you'll have an average of $400,000 per year. Next layer, the customization support. Vendor maintenance does not include support for custom code, requiring many of you to delegate full-time employees and even consultants to maintain custom code, adding a potential, depending on what you're paying for them, around $300,000 in annual cost. At Rimini Street, 2/3 or 66% of the 30,000 cases that we resolve for our clients each year are related to custom code, interfaces, integrations, performance tuning, and even how-to questions that are not answered by the vendor. The next layer is self-support. This is the self-support burden that's put on your resources. And unfortunately, it's probably the most misunderstood area, and it really drives CIOs crazy. This problem starts with the way that vendors deliver enhancement packs, fixed packs, and bundles. Your teams have to review, they have to assess, they have to regression test, and manage hundreds of fixes when all you needed was just one. You just needed one fix. The burden's now on your team to make sure that that bundle does not have a ripple effect causing business disruption and wasted cycles. Rimini Street has the ability to provide you that one fix to keep your systems running on the release of the software that you are running today. When you add this all up, the total is more like $2 million per year. Not $1 million of what you're paying on that invoice, but $2 million per year. You might think you're only spending $1 million. You're paying double that. At Rimini Street, we cut your annual maintenance cost in half. All of these costs that are below the waterline go away. On average, we end up saving our clients 75% of the total support cost compared to the vendor's support model. Fact is, you have to have time, money, and resources to invest in the solutions that Jeffrey spoke about in the beginning of this presentation. Third-party support is absolutely one of the ways to do so. I'm really excited today to welcome 3 of Rimini Street clients to the stage. So let's see if we can get everyone's video on, and don't forget to unmute yourself since I forgot to. First, we have Darren Burdine, Manager in IT Infrastructure at AESO. We have Alan Hebel from Alta Gas. And we have James Taylor, Senior Manager of Information Technology at TransAlta. Darren, let's start with you first. If you could tell us about AESO and the role that you play within that organization.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Darren Burdine, and I'm a Manager of Infrastructure Design and Operations at the Alberta Electric Systems Operator. I actually manage the infrastructure groups in the IT area, so I work with the network, our servers, ensuring that we have all of the required infrastructure so that the AESO can meet its mandate. The AESO is actually an agency of the Alberta government, and we are responsible for the safe, reliable economic planning and operation of the Alberta Interconnected Electric System, really known as the grid. Our goal, or our mandate, is to ensure that Albertans have the ability to turn on their lights when they need them at any point in time. One of the things that we talked about actually in 2019 was how we could get our workforce a little bit more mobile and give them a lot more flexibility. That was deemed to be something that was important to us as an IT initiative moving into 2020. Little did we know that focusing on this was going to help us significantly in our current environment with COVID. One of the things Rimini Street allowed us to do was to move our vendor expenses away from current vendors and to Rimini Street for the Oracle database, WebLogic, SAP Business Objects, and that allowed us to really focus on deploying mobile devices as well as Office 365 into our work environment.
Okay, thank you, Darren. So, Alan, how about you want to go? Do you want to go next? And Alan is with Alta Gas.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alan Hebel, Corporate Application Manager at Alta Gas. So, Alta Gas, a Canadian corporation, is a true North American energy infrastructure business with a focus on owning and operating assets to provide clean and affordable energy to its customers. Alta Gas's business strategy is underpinned by the growing demand of clean energy with natural gas as the key fuel source. At Alta Gas, I take care of corporate applications, which includes ERP and a lot of other applications within Alta Gas. One of our focus at Alta Gas has been cost savings. The pandemic has been very, very difficult on all kinds of companies across the world. Alta Gas is no exception. but we have been nimble within that with what we have energized within 2018 and 19. A lot of energy is transformation.
Thank you, James. Oh, I'm sorry, Alan and James, you're up next from TransAlta. Appreciate that, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I am James Taylor. I'm a senior IT leader within TransAlta's IT department. I oversee, well, at present, my portfolio has changed, although when we engaged with Rimini Street, I was overseeing the enterprise applications group, which included our SAP, ECC, ERP. And TransAlta's strategy is to be a top clean energy producer within Canada, the United States, and Australia. We are quite an old company, as you can see, over 100 years old. We've been going through a very significant transformation, which we like to call it an old company acting like a startup. And so part of this transformation has taken us on a long journey of a lot of cost reductions, a lot of efficiency gains, as well as now we're a top strategic position is to convert our coal plants to gas plants in alignment with our green initiative. And so the partnership with Rimini has helped us get to part of our goal.
Okay. Great. It's great to hear that. Thank you. So I'm going to go back through. Darren, I'm going to start with you. So you mentioned a couple of your top strategic initiatives over at AESO that you're trying to accomplish in 2020. Can you expand on that a little bit more and how you plan on paying for them?
Sure. One of the things that we deemed important to us was having a flexible workplace. It gives a lot of our employees the opportunity to work from where they need to, when they want to. And one of the things that we needed to do was to get away from the traditional desktops that we were currently running. That basically required us to move into a lot more of the cloud strategy using Office 365, as well as having more mobile devices. Spending the time focusing on getting all of that infrastructure in place and rolled out, providing training to all of our employees was deemed actually to be a lot more important than perhaps spending time doing an upgrade on an Oracle database or managing our current WebLogic environment.
All righty. So, Alan, how about you next? And by the way, you forgot to mention that you actually have two distinct careers, not just in IT, but you also have a Canadian military career. That's correct.
That is correct, Rene. I was ex-Canadian military. I was moved into action in Bosnia in 1993, serving with Canadian Forces. So with the question that you asked, Rene, our saving energies have been around we've grown by acquisition. So we've grown tremendously by acquisition. In 2015, when I joined Alta Gas, we were an $8 billion company. Within 2018, tail end of it, we had more than tripled. So we had grown and we had growing pains. We initiated a transformation project, which started in 18, and we completed a lot in 2019 and set ourselves up for 2020. This year, our major initiative is data center consolidation. We currently have, through acquisitions, 12 data centers throughout North America. And what we're doing is consolidating this to simply 2 data centers. We're in the process of that. We're planning to be done by the end of the year. So that's a major project we have. Microsoft Teams has been, we were on Jabber prior, and we had an initiative at the tail end of 2019, is to start looking at migrating to Microsoft Teams. We had the plan to go to Microsoft Teams, and we had the plan to go live later this summer. Although with the pandemic that had arrived, we had a very, very quick learning that we really need to be very nimble around how we kept everybody working to keep the company afloat. So we rolled out Teams in about a week span to our entire corporation. And then what we did is we did sort of, as we were rolling it out, we were doing releases. So we were doing tuning and rolling it out. And it took us another week to really iron out. And we're working with Microsoft a couple of lines. But we successfully rolled out within a week teams to everybody and became all nimble within the organization. And our third one is a large initiative, which is application management services outsourcing. One of the areas that we're looking at had already done some outsourcing in our other areas. We're trying to stay more focused to our core business practice. So application management services on the books this year, we are going through the RFPs out, and we are working through what that looks like for Alta Gas. Those are the major initiatives we are doing this year. We're going to help align to 2020.
Sounds like you set a record for that Teams rollout. I know it took us a little bit longer than that, but sounds like that was a great effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so James with TransAlta, same question to you. What are your top strategic initiatives at TransAlta, and how are you going to pay for them?
Well, within the IT department, cost reduction was a very significant goal for us to achieve, as well as moving to the cloud, which enables us to have the flexibility and agility to move really quickly. And so with that, how we're going to pay for these initiatives is through cost reduction. So we look at areas where we can reduce costs and manage those costs. So for example, when we move to the cloud, which we are very heavily invested in Microsoft Azure, our data center today within the Calgary office is really about 2 racks now. So it was a very significant move of our infrastructure over. To achieve cost reductions, we also had to change the way that we operated. We couldn't operate the cloud infrastructure the same way we operated on-premise in the legacy sense. So we really had to adopt a new way of operating, such as shutting servers off when they're not actively being used. But at the same time, we had to ensure that it was a really efficient process to be able to spin servers up and down. So we were able to achieve that, which yielded very significant cost savings. On another aspect was to look at other areas like our ERP and look at where can we reduce costs, because it's like a lot of companies, your ERP expense, total cost ownership is very significant. So we looked at ways, how could we reduce the cost of our ERP? And part of that was our engagement with Rimini Street, as well looking at other areas as well too, such as just staying on ECC for a while we figure out the rest of the company with our coal to gas transition. With that, we did achieve about an 80% cost reduction within our ERP costs, and on our data center costs, we achieved about a 60% reduction in cost.
Fantastic to hear. And it sounds like you took advantage of getting off that treadmill as well from the required upgrades with your ERP application. So the last question I have for our client panel is to tell us more about your digital transformation as well as your ERP landscape. And I've heard a couple applications mentioned, but if you could expand on that, and then how you've worked with Rimini Street as others to optimize your costs and maximize your ROI. So Darren, back to you.
So as I mentioned before, we've got the Oracle database, WebLogic, SAP Business Objects that are running in our environment for reporting and underlying database structure. And we felt that it was more important for us to be able to focus on other areas versus doing an upgrade and managing them. So by entering into our partnership with Rimini Street, we gained a lot of technical expertise, which helps us to maintain and run our existing environment a little bit longer and gives us a little bit of a breathing room, which allows us to spend a lot of time on other things that are a lot more important to us right now.
Yeah, a breathing room's important right now. There's not a lot of it going around.
Indeed.
All right, Alan. Alan, how about you with Alta Gas? What are your top priorities of digital transformation?
For digital transformation, for cost savings, what we've done, so in 2018, I managed a ERP JD Edwards internal upgrade of the product line. So I brought it up to 9.2. 2019, I was looking and researching what could I do to be able to reduce Oracle maintenance. So when I came across Rimini Street, I started working with Rimini Street and worked quite a bit with Rimini Street to try to vet out what that would look like for Alta Gas. Alta Gas is one of the companies that's very, they do not like to do change, that type of change in that type of nature. They really like to stay with the primary vendor that holds the software and stay with status quo. Although, with Rimini Street and seeing the saving and understanding the structure, I pressed for this to be implemented within Alta Gas. And then we did sign with Rimini Street in the beginning of May for services. And the same week that that was delivered to us, we signed the contract, $1.7 million in savings to IT was being deposited to senior leaders team. So when my boss indicated we had $1.7 million to save, he was happy to say that I had already saved my portion, and that if I can share my budget to my BU's budget to others, then they would happily take it. If not, they have a lot of work to do. So I was very happy to include the cost of G&A, break fix, custom code, all that really reduce our footprint and really be able to align my team to be able to reduce G&A spend and move to what I call center of excellence, more business process support, helping the business align to utilizing the ERP to maximize their benefit.
It's great news. You said 1.7 million was your savings?
1.7 million was the entire savings for IT. There was 4 departments that were delivered savings, and we were delivered 1.7, but when we divided it up to the 5 BUs, my BU had already saved its amount. So I was very happy.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
So James, how about with TransAlta? Tell us about your digital transformation and your ERP landscape and how you've worked with Rimini Street to optimize your costs and maximize ROI.
So with our relationship with Rimini Street, what it afforded us was it bought us time that we could stay on the ECC. We had looked at S4 as a viable option to move to it, but with the company's transformation not completed yet, we didn't feel the timing was right to move to new ERP because we felt we would be putting in an ERP for the way we work today and yesterday. Because we weren't quite ready. We wanted to ensure that when we take that next step to a new ERP, it's for the new TransAlta. So it really bought us that time so that we could just take that step back and focus all of our effort on our processes for the new TransAlta, while Rimini Street provides the support that we required to keep our existing ERP fully functional. It also allowed us to reduce our costs. And so our cost savings totaled up to about 80%, which was very significant. And part of that cost savings was vendor cost. So it allowed us to reduce our costs to the vendor that we were paying for the support and maintenance. It also allowed us to reduce our overall staff headcount because now we have Rimini Street actually providing the break fix and some of the services that SAP did not provide us, but yet we had to have local headcount provide those services. So overall, it was a very significant cost savings for us, and it has worked out really well for us.
Yeah, James, thank you. And it looks like you're also consuming our payroll tax updates. Is that correct?
That is correct, because that was one gap that was a high-risk gap, as we saw it, that we were going to lose by discontinuing our support with SAP. And but Rimini has picked up that and fulfilled that gap.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. Before I turn it over to Dan King from Energy Now, for Q&A. I want to thank each of our panelists for not only participating today. It takes time to put together a webinar and to participate in something like this, and so we really appreciate it. But I also want to say thank you for being clients of Rimini Street. I do want to remind everyone that you will have access to the Gartner 2020 Predicts report. I talked a little bit about what was in there, especially as related to third-party support, as part of its presentation. And don't forget, you still have some time to participate in our survey that we have running. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dan, and hopefully we've got Jeffrey in here too, because I know we had a couple questions that were actually pre-submitted. So Dan, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Renee. And thank you also to the client panelists.
Yeah, thank you.
Some great information from Darren, Alan, and James. Thank you very much. First, I got a couple questions for Jeffrey. We'll start off with, I'm sure you get a lot of questions like this, Jeffrey. But the question is, where are we in the cycle of how much longer do we have for this recovery that we're anticipating? Could you answer that question?
The oil recovery specifically. It is very, very challenging to predict that because of the sheer number of variables that are at play. And I like to remind people that there are two factors to think about. There's the supply of hydrocarbons and fossil fuels in the industry, and there's the demand curve. And both curves are in motion at the moment. Normally, the demand curve is when you get into a downturn like this, the demand curve typically bounces back quickly because people have start driving their cars and ships start sailing and airplanes start flying. But until we start seeing aircraft getting back in the air and cars getting back on the road, the supply curve, demand curve is much harder to predict. On the supply side, we have lots and lots of supply of hydrocarbons now, and at least a decade of production growth has disappeared as a consequence of the pandemic. And so for it to come back to where it was in 2019 is not going to be anytime soon. So I certainly, my advice to people who ask this question is you should prepare for a fairly protracted and lengthy period of adjustment to this situation that we find ourselves in. It's not going to fix itself overnight.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. So the second question for you, and again, probably a hot topic here in Canada. We do have some attendees from outside of Canada. Maybe help us understand what is unique about the Canadian oil and gas industry that's a little different than the US and around the world.
Well, the Canadian oil and gas industry, so it's important to divide it up into two parts. There's the oil industry and there's the gas industry. So first factor that's important to note is that Canada's principal resource for oil is its oil sands deposit. Which is measured in hundreds of billions of recoverable bitumen product, which is a heavy oil, a very heavy oil product. It needs to be carefully refined so that the valuable components can be extracted. And the industry is also quite concentrated. 70% of all the oil production in Canada is produced by just 4 companies. So it's a concentrated industry. It's an industry of large-scale capital, heavy emphasis now on the oil sands deposits, both the surface mining deposits as well as the in-situ deposits. And so that's a slightly different structure than what it's from other countries. A second significant structural issue is that Canada typically consumes its oil domestically, and its single biggest and pretty much only market is the United States. And in the past 10 years, if you've been watching oil markets carefully, what you'll note is that the Americans have grown their ability to produce their own oil at a pace that now is moving the U.S. to largely self-sufficiency status, even to a point where it's a significant exporter. And so Canada's structural challenge is how to find new markets for that heavy oil product. that's a unique feature about the local market here on the oil side. On the gas side, similar situation. Canada does not have an LNG export industry to move all of its excess gas into markets that want gas. And the gas goes down to the United States, who are, again, long on gas. And so Canada is a country that is very focused on taking cost and improving the productivity of its resources out, because it has to in order to compete against the supplies that are available in the United States.
Okay, great answer. Thank you, Jeffrey. The third question, the next question is for Rene. Rene, how are CFOs responding to this crisis and the need for digital investments? Can you answer that?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that one. So managing risk and maintaining strong cash position is usually at the forefront and center for CFOs today. They typically ask themselves, how can I be a good steward of my company assets? And they're looking to maximize the life of assets as well as the value around them. So typically, CFOs are proponents of digital investments as long as they have a strong ROI. And in addition, they're proponents to areas where the organization can tighten up cost. So one of our panelists mentioned that they were looking at moving forward to, looking at a new version of the ERP application. And when they did that review, it didn't have a strong enough ROI for the investment. So that was a great example. Again, many CFOs actually do see that third-party support is a way to tighten up their cost.
Okay, thank you, Rene. Yep. The next question, again, is for you. I think I have to give, again, this is just a quick question that maybe a CFO is asking. I think I have to give a 90-day notice to SAP if I'm going to move to a third-party support. Do I have time, is the question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Might also come from a procurement officer too. That might be managing some contracts. So absolutely, you have time this year. So I'm glad somebody brought that up because many people may not realize that you do have to provide a 90-day notice period to the vendor. Typically, for many organizations, the SAP maintenance, this is specific if the question was about SAP. So typically, an SAP maintenance end date is at the end of December, which means that the last day that you can put your notice in would be at the end of September, if that maintenance date is at the end of December. So you got to give that 90-day notice, and you need to do that to make sure that you don't get locked in for another year. It's important to remember, right, that the iceberg that I showed the yearly spending. It's not just what is on that invoice. It is also everything that is below that water line. So don't forget about that iceberg.
Okay, thank you, Rene.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions, but do you have any other things, any comments, Rene, or any questions that perhaps people have been asking in the last few weeks or last 2 or 3 months, and any other comments or from our panelists or Jeffrey?
I just have one comment. I would really like to again thank our clients for participating in this opportunity, and also like to thank Energy Now for our partnership. Appreciate that as well.
Well, right back at you. So we're definitely pleased to co-sponsor this webinar, and we look forward to some in the near future we can jointly do. I also encourage people to visit energynow.ca in Canada and .com in the US and internationally. We do plan to share the webinar on Energy Now, and we will be sending the webinar link out to all the attendees. Perhaps anybody that was having some technical problems, because we do live in a technical world. We'll certainly be sending out that information as well as the Gardner reports. And anything else that we think would be of value, we'll make sure that it gets to all the attendees and the other stakeholders. So from Energy Now, and from Rimini Street, and from the panelists and Jeffrey, we want to thank everyone for attending and have a fantastic week. And thank you very much again. Bye for now.